I hope your papers are in order, because this week Noir Alley is leaving Bar 355 to travel out of the country. I'm your tour guide, Eddie Muller, and this time I'm taking us on a trip to Cuba, circa 1950, for the MGM production A Lady Without Passport. As you can tell from this poster, the film's promotion was focused entirely on its glamorous female star. An Austrian by birth, Hedy Lamarr had been brought to America in 1938 by Louis B. Mayer, head of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. They'd met in London the previous year when Mayer was in Europe searching for new faces that could fill a 40-foot-tall movie screen. There's an intriguing backstory to how Lamarr ended up in England at that time, but that's for the outro. Suffice to say, Mayer believed Lamarr had the beauty and talent to be the studio's black-haired version of such worldly and mysterious temptresses as Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich. And his hunch was right, especially when MGM began touting Hedy Lamarr as the most beautiful woman in the world. Starting with Algiers in 1938, she appeared in a succession of hits: Boomtown, Comrade X, Tortilla Flat, White Cargo, and lots of others. Unlike Garbo and Dietrich, each of whom cultivated a singular persona, Lamarr played a variety of ethnicities. Although none of her roles, at MGM or elsewhere, captured a fraction of the actress's innate intelligence and sophistication, something that aggravated Lamarr as she matured. Not to mention, her popularity began to wane during the post-war years as more and more sultry, dark-haired beauties filled American movie screens, particularly in film noir. But Lamarr enjoyed a comeback in 1950, portraying the biblical vixen Delilah in Cecil B. DeMille's Samson and Delilah, the biggest grossing film of that year. Its success prompted MGM to build a vehicle for Lamarr's resurgent popularity. She earned $90 grand for making this film, which must have been especially sweet given that Louis B. Mayer had cut off her contract in 1945, when he felt her allure had worn thin. A Lady Without Passport is based on a story by Lawrence Taylor called Visa, adapted by Cyril Hume and scripted by Howard Dimsdale. It was modeled on Casablanca, with a plot that hinges on refugees, this time in Havana, awaiting letters of transit to America, either legally or otherwise. It borrows bits of Notorious and Gilda, as well as The Bribe, a film made at MGM the previous year. Here, John Hodiak is an undercover immigration agent investigating a racket in human smuggling. It's operated by one of the great on-screen villains of the era, George McCready. Now, these guys are perfectly cast antagonists, but some viewers, then and now, may have a hard time accepting Hedy Lamarr as a concentration camp survivor, especially when the wardrobe department outfits her in a costume Delilah might have worn. Not especially convincing, but I doubt there were any complaints at the time. Well, this being MGM, serious money was pumped into the production, which included shooting on location in Havana. In fact, some of the film's narrative drive is diminished by sections of scenic travelogue. At times, it feels like we're watching someone's vacation movies instead of a briskly paced thriller. That said, it is a fascinating glimpse of democratic Cuba prior to the military dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista, who would assume power in 1952, before being overthrown in 1959 by the Fidel Castro-led revolution. This was the biggest production yet for director Joseph H. Lewis, who just made the extraordinary Gun Crazy, a box office flop now considered a masterpiece. Lewis spent the previous decade building a reputation for visually stylish movies made on meager budgets, a talent he developed turning out B films at Columbia, where he worked several times with today's co-stars, George McCready and Stephen Garay. Tired of being passed over for A-list projects, Lewis left Columbia in a huff in 1949. He hooked up with the King brothers, Poverty Row producers who promised him more creative control than he'd ever had at Columbia. Lewis and the Kings planned a whole series of features, But after Gun Crazy, Lewis betrayed the Kings by leaping at MGM's offer to direct this film. He couldn't resist the status that came with making movies at the Tiffany studio. He ended up regretting his decision. Featuring fantastic cinematography by Paul Vogel and a lush romantic score by David Raksin of Laura fame, here is Hedy Lamarr, at 35, still arguably the most beautiful woman in the world, starring in A Lady Without Passport.